It's time for the EU to have its own army, according to the European Commission chief, whose calls are resonating with Germany and Finland, who say they're on board. The dangers of the oil boom in the US. A rise in crude shipping by rail triggers a spike in oil accidents, with the most recent derailment in Illinois ending in days of fire. Plus, London's population reaches an all-time high of over 8.5 million, with forecasts fueling worries that the British capital is fit to burst. Hello there, welcome to RT International. It's just gone midday here in the Russian capital. Now, calls to create a joint EU army are growing stronger throughout the bloc. Finland and Germany say they're on board with the idea, which was put forward by the head of the European Commission on Sunday. Let's get more from our Berlin correspondent, Peter Oliver, just now. Hi, Peter, good to see you. So what's the general feeling in Europe about creating its own army?
Well, in general, the feeling is rather much indifference. However, key players have said that they're on board with it. Finland have said they're on side with creating this, but most notably, Germany have said that they're on side with it. We heard from Jean-Claude Juncker saying that an EU army was the future. Well, that was pretty much backed up by the German Defence Ministry here in Berlin. The quote from them was that it was a vision whose time has come. It's not the first time, though, that the EU has broached this subject. The last time was back in 2013, and it was thoroughly scotched by the United Kingdom.
It isn't right for the European Union to have capabilities, armies, air forces and the rest of it.
Of course, Eurosceptic groups in the EU are against this. We heard from them speaking about the subject of raising an EU army, and, well, they're not on board.
An army, their own or someone else's. Now Brussels wants its own army. Do you think this is a good idea?
Well, the EU Commission President, Jean-Claude Juncker says he needs an army. However, Russia counters that by saying this is just the paranoia of the European Union, that Russia has no intention of going to war with anybody, and the idea of creating an EU army in order to counter Russia, well, it's simply ridiculous.
Peter Oliver in Berlin, thanks for that update. Russia dismisses its claims that it could be a threat to European security. Fears of possible aggression have been haunting Europe in recent months. Last October, Sweden spent more than €2 million and an entire week on a massive but fruitless hunt for a phantom Russian submarine. And last December, the UK also sounded the alarm over a suspected Russian sub off of Scotland. There's also been much concern in the skies too. In January, UK fighter jets were scrambled to intercept 2 Russian military jets above the English Channel. There was a similar incident off of Cornwall last month. Both times, Russian jets were not violating borders and were spotted in international airspace. Former Belgian MP Lode Van Oos thinks the plan to create an EU army is not only aimed at Russia, but at the US as well.
You do not defend values with an army. Democracy or prosperity or social economy, those are all things that are not military. The idea itself is not new at all. The context today, of course, is different. Actually, the European Union countries separately are already spending much more than, for example, the so-called opponent in this way, Russia. And they want to re-establish themselves militarily because economically they're losing ground. Within Europe, want to establish itself again as an entity next to the United States. I mean, this idea floated by Juncker now is not just aimed at Russia, it is aimed at the United States as well. No, we're not going to do as you tell us, you're an ally, but we define our policy ourselves.
Critics of the proposal say there's simply no need for an EU army when you have NATO, which is seen as the cornerstone of European defence. The bloc does have its own security and defence service, but its missions largely duplicate what NATO already does.
Following a United Nations request in 2008, NATO deployed a naval force to the region to escort ships that were carrying humanitarian aid to Somalia under the World Food Programme.
But the EU has also been doing just that. Its naval force was sent to the area at about the same time. The EU's first combat deployment to root out piracy off Somalia in 2008 is being seized on by Brussels critics for spending money on missions remarkably similar to NATO's. It's a view shared by Belgium's defence minister at the time.
We had a counter-piracy operation which was Atalanta. In fact, an operation of the European Union as a whole, but at the same time we had the Operation Ocean Shield that was fostered by NATO. That's duplication, that's something that we should avoid.
Europe's central bank is kicking off its unprecedented €1 trillion blitz of bond buying in order to stimulate the bloc's economy and avoid deflation. With all other recovery options now exhausted, the currency union has finally resorted to stepping onto the thorny path of full-blown quantitative easing. Now that means printing money, and lots of it. It means the ECB will be able to buy the debts of troubled member states from their national banks, and it's hoped spur inflation. Economist Felix Moreno de la Cova says pressing the money printing button won't benefit citizens further down the chain.
The reason for QE, again, the intentions behind it are not the intentions announced and publicly made by the European Central Bank chairman and by all the politicians. The real reason is to prop up the stock markets and to have an impact on the financial institutions, which they hope will trickle down to the real economy. These monetary injections programs have no measurable effect at all on the job market, on the real economy, on Main Street. So if you're in financial markets, if you're invested in European stock exchanges, you will probably be very happy that the ECB is injecting money into the system. However, if you're an unemployed person in Greece or in Spain, it will probably have no measurable impact whatsoever on your life.
Greece won't be involved in the money printing rescue operation until it agrees a new debt deal with Brussels. The ECB has already supplied a €100 billion cash injection for Athens, doubling its lending in the past 2 months alone. Ahead of the crucial Eurozone meeting with its counterparts, Greece's finance minister went as far as saying he's open to a referendum or even fresh elections if the other currency members reject Athens' proposed reforms.
Well, it's not wise at all. It's a big mistake. If we also take the liabilities in the Target 2 system of the European bank system compensation, there's probably a lot more money at risk from the Euro system in Greece. So if there's a Grexit, if Greece leaves the Eurozone, it's going to be absolute chaos, and they should be trying to reduce the impact right now instead of increasing the exposure to it.
More from Greece later, as healthcare suffers symptoms caused by the country's battered economy. Dire finances are hitting hospitals, leaving the sick and vulnerable with nowhere to turn, as we report later. Also ahead, London's growing, but is it too much, too fast? The city's population is bigger than ever. We asked people there how they feel about their cramped capital. That's coming up in a few minutes. Social network sites are cracking down on accounts affiliated with jihadists after a study revealed up to 90,000 Twitter accounts were spreading Islamic State propaganda last year. But supporters of the terror group have already moved on and set up their own platform. The site mimics Facebook and lets users create profiles and update personal information. A statement of the platform says it hasn't been directly set up by Islamic State, but it does pledge complete loyalty to the terror group. Islamic State was behind at least 46,000 Twitter accounts in late 2014 alone, although the biggest estimate puts it at about double that number. Each ISIS-supporting account averaged around 1,000 followers. The number of explicitly ISIS supporters accounts tallied 46,000. The majority of profiles are located in Saudi Arabia, but Syria and Iraq are also in the top 3. Over 400 profiles were registered in the United States and more than 100 in Britain. UK-based Syrian activist Danny Mackey warns it will be very difficult to block Islamic State's social media sites.
I mean, ISIS has adopted social media as a primary route of radicalization and of brainwashing and indoctrination. The majority of foreign fighters who have come to Syria or Iraq have come through social media, through talking to ISIS fighters on Twitter and Facebook. The fundamental difference between this new site which ISIS have attempted to create and previous accounts on Twitter is that this is an actual social media site. It cannot be legally blocked by the US government, and it is said to be produced and done from Egypt. So the actual technical difficulties of getting this site to be shut is completely different to shutting a Twitter account or a Facebook account. It's primarily for jihadists to stay in touch. It's called Khalifa Book, and it is very similar to Facebook in its own structure, but the site is not yet complete. It's still in an initial phase of completion, so it still has time to reach a point where it can be used effectively and fluently.
ISIS supporters have even gone as far as advertising Islamic State-branded children's clothes. And here are some, frankly, disturbing pictures of youngsters dressed in ISIS clothes. They're circulating online after being uploaded by the jihadi mothers. On top of that, Islamic State fighters are also trying to make their fashion statements by showing off ISIS-branded accessories online. The somewhat dubious taste in clothing aside, terrorism expert Frank Salvato says Islamic State internet campaign is proving disturbingly successful.
How effective are they? I think they're very effective. I think that given the oppressive culture of fundamentalist Islam, that some of this message rings true to people even here in the West who seem to be people who don't have an opinion on it. So by using social media, they're breaking a generational gap and using new technology in an effort to recruit, an effort to message, and an effort to expand their reach. Al-Baghdadi is not the central figure, and this is where ego targeted bin Laden and al-Zawahiri. What he's doing is promoting the brand of ISIS. He's using lessons of Madison Avenue in New York and marketing, in order to market his brand, which is ISIS. So once again, we find ourselves in the battlefield of the war of ideas, the war of ideology, the war of marketing a message.
I'll be back with more international news after this break.
I'm a fighter. I strike when I need to strike. Just like that. I'm Aaron Aid, and I put the boom into boom bust.
The policies that the West have been pushing, NATO expansion, EU expansion, and democracy promotion, have been disastrous for the Ukrainian people. It's created this present mess that they're in. Ukraine would be much better off if it were a neutral buffer state.
Do we speak your language? Want news, programs, and documentaries in Spanish? What matters to you? Breaking news, alternative angles, hidden stories. Are you here? Then try RT Spanish. To find out more, visit actualidad.rt.com.